Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 16 of Walking Down the Warwick Road. I'm Tim, as always, joined by my co-host Pete. Pete, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Tim. I'm looking forward to this, trying to put a bit of a spotlight on some of the people we don't hear too much about.
Yeah, indeed. It's good to be back. And of course, we're joined by one of our resident guests, Roger Gardner. Roy will be hopefully joining us. We're just working out some technical difficulties. But Roger, good to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well. I hope he does turn up, because all I know of Les Olive was that he read the resignation of Tommy Docherty to me in 1977. So I wasn't too happy with that, but I'm looking forward to hearing from him for sure.
Brilliant. Hopefully we will get Roy on here very, very shortly. But Roger, you kind of touched on it there. It's a good segue. Today's episode, we are looking at United's vital backroom men. And for a club that has, sort of experienced so much glory throughout its history, we all know about the big players and the managers that have been there at the forefront. But Pete, there were people behind the scenes, certainly, or people that at least that didn't get maybe the recognition they deserved, or did play that vital role in shrouding this club in success. So why this topic? What is it that stood out about this one for you?
Well, we've covered a couple of the managers, and we intend to do that more in the future. But usually we cover the players, the great scorers, the great heroes, the great goalkeepers. But when with all the success United have had over the years, I always think you never get success if you've not got a good manager. And every good manager needs a good backroom staff around him or her in the current game. And whilst the managers get publicity, they have their programme notes every match day, and of course they're covered on TV nowadays from all angles. We rarely hear that much about the backroom people, and we wanted to just highlight them and pick for each of us to pick two who we thought were vital backroom staff. So it's not just that they had longevity of service; it's they were vital to that manager at the time and the success that United had. Every manager needs a rock, but those people barely step into the limelight. So today we're going to try and highlight a few of those people. Some the viewers will have heard of, but we'd like to just highlight why they were so vital at that time in our history. And we're going to pick two each, which should be 8 if Roy joins us, and then we'll do a special 9th at the end.
Fantastic.
Indeed, yeah, we're in for for a fantastic show today. As always, we like to hear your thoughts and your memories, or your thoughts on United's United's vital backroom men. So make sure that you get in the comments. You can respond to the show. It's live on Twitter now, so you can respond to it right underneath the video, the tweets, if you'd like, and I can read some of those out. Or you can just get right in the comments and send us a comment and give us your thoughts. So make sure you get involved. This is certainly a show for the fans. Right. Well, as we wait for Roy, Roger, we'll come to you first. And who is the first vital backroom man that we need to look at today?
Well, I had a good long think, and there are so many to choose from. But I actually went for Brian Kidd, who backroom staff at United from 1988 to 1998, so 10 years. I liked him because he was local to Manchester United. There you can see some stats on the screen. He was local to United, came from the same suburb as Nobby Stiles. Famously, of course, he won the European Cup as a youth, scoring on his 19th birthday. Brought in by Ferguson pretty much to give him something to do. And he was promoted to assistant manager and very much led United on to their ultimate success, really. And he was part of that team that brought home that first championship win since 1967. I still call it the the championship, you know, because that's what we were trying to win all of those years. When he arrived at the club, the squad was aging, and it was obvious to Ferguson that something had to change. It was 20 years plus since the title, and Ferguson had shipped out some of the stalwarts from Ron Atkinson's team that summer. Paul McGrath and Norman Whiteside would also go not too far into the future as well. But Ferguson knew of Manchester United from what he saw of United when they toured America in the 1950s with young players. So he very much believed in youth and really wanted to, I think, emulate Sir Matt Busby's work. And what he knew was that work, you know, really required detail. We're seeing great pictures there of Brian Kidd. That's the semi-final against Oldham. No, that might be the Sheffield Wednesday game. We covered the Oldham semi-final game in the FA Cup on a recent podcast, and Ferguson and Kidd were running onto the pitch with glee as we equalised very late on there. So I was saying, basically, Fergie knew that you didn't develop a youth team without work, without scouts, without a really good network. And one of the first groups of players that Brian Kidd actually worked with were the first crop of Fergie's fledglings, as they were called, in the 88-89 season. And for the record, that was the time when Pete was going through his laundry basket to try and find a suitable white sheet and a suitable marker pen to design his Get Fergie outfit, because things were going pretty drab. But these fledglings that came to Old Trafford in the early part of 1989, really breathed life into United. Sadly, really, only 3 of them survived to any great feat. Mark Robbins, who, of course, rescued Fergie's job, if you believe it, at Nottingham Forest a year later. Russell Beardsmore and Lee Sharp probably were best remembered. But, you know, those players didn't come to United as great players. They were certainly worked on by Brian Kidd. And things, you know, between January and March 89 were really, really looking good at Old Trafford. And we went on a cup run as far as the quarter-final. Unfortunately, we lost to Nottingham Forest. And
all right.
Yes, Roy. And Brian McClare's goal didn't stand. And unfortunately, the original fledglings died a death, really. Some of them were injured.
I'm looking at the
Good enough. And Kidd had to go really back to the drawing board, but he would get involved in the class of 92, of course, which we're going to cover as well, I'm sure, later on. But Brian Kidd was one of those people that recognised the quality of Paul Scholes as a youth and was persuading everybody to get the guy to come to Old Trafford. Kidd also worked with Gary Neville from the age of 12, and David Beckham came to Old Trafford in 1990, and he was crucial in his development as well. So sort of on the train, really, United were improving by this stage. So we'd won the FA Cup, we were doing well in the Cup Winners' Cup, and then unfortunately, Archie Knox, who was Ferguson's trusted assistant from his Aberdeen days, decided that he wanted to go to Rangers. So Fergie had a bit of a dilemma. So he basically turned to Brian Kidd and said, you know, can you help me with the first team for a bit, which Kidd did. And then Ferguson asked him basically to become his assistant, and he turned down the job. But Fergie, being Fergie, just wouldn't have it, and Brian Kidd nonetheless became Ferguson's assistant on the same day, actually, in August 1991, that Peter Schmeichel joined the club. I was going to say at this point as well, my first image of Brian Kidd, of course, was in '68, scoring that goal in the European Cup final. But the most memorable image has to be the one you've just seen 2 minutes ago, of him kissing the pitch there as United celebrated those Steve Bruce goals that got us back into the championship race and certainly helped us continue. I just want to go through, but before I finish on Brian Kidd, really, just what period of success in that 10 years happened. You know, we won the league in 93. We stopped mentioning 67. We won the double in 94. We almost repeated it in 95. Of course, we lost famously at that game at West Ham on the last day of the season. And we didn't win the FA Cup the week after against Everton. We won the double again in 96 up at Middlesbrough. And 97, we were champions. And we got to the semi-finals of the Champions League in 1997 as well. So things were looking pretty good. And there was no reason really at all for a kid to leave. However, he had a bit of a fallout with Sir Alex around the summer of 1998 when Fergie wanted to bring in Dwight Yorke, which of course he famously did. Basically, Roy Hodgson, who was at Blackburn, got the push late in 1998, and they approached Kidd, who accepted the job. And this sort of peeved Ferguson off a bit, I think, because Kidd had only just signed a new contract with United, and he wasn't absolutely clear, like Archie Knox had been clear about wanting to leave. And it left quite a bitter taste, really, I think, in Fergie's mouth. And after Brian Kidd left United, he got ill with prostate cancer. And apparently, if what we read is true, Fergie didn't even ring him to offer his sympathies there. So just a quick summary of Brian Kidd, who was my first choice. He worked with the class of 1992 when they were in the academy. He was part of that team that won that all-important first Premier League title. We won 2 doubles under him. And I believe if Brian hadn't been approached to go to Blackburn, that, by the way, wasn't a successful move for him, he would have been part of the team that delivered the treble. There you go, guys. That's my synopsis of Brian Kidd, and I hope I got that right.
Good stuff. That was very, very, very good. Thank you, Roger. Right. Roy has joined us. And certainly Kiddo, a legend at United. Everyone knows that. And so a good summary there by Roger to tips through Brian Kidd. Roy is here, and we'll hear from Roy in just a minute. How you doing, Roy? Oh, your mic's muted there, Roy. Just got to unmute your mic.
There you okay?
Yeah, you're good.
I was offered thousands not to compete today, but thanks to Tim's expertise and Roger and Pete's patience, here I am, guys, and it's always a pleasure to be with 3 other professionals. Sorry, I mean with 3 professionals and me. So happy.
We
no,
heard
don't even go there.
We heard the checkered bounce, Roy.
Yeah. Yeah. Who needs money?
Could have just Roger. That was a great summary of Kiddo, and of course I was lucky enough to see Kiddo come through. He was the link with that 67 side that won the last First Division title. He'd come in as a youngster, and I think, as you say, Fergie recognised that the respect he had amongst Manchester football, and when he lost Archie Knox, Fergie, about 91, Kidd was an obvious successor, but I don't think any of it had seen that in him at first team level, how much he could contribute. But when you go through, as you did, what we won from 91 to 98, it really set up the modern day United.
Yeah, I have to say as well, I don't know whether you agree, Pete. I always found Archie Knox quite difficult to understand. And I'm sure the players, unless you were Gordon Strachan or Arthur Olberston, being Scottish, I think they would have found him quite difficult to understand. Whereas actually, I think Brian Kidd taught the players language, in a very Mancunian way. And I think that's one of the reasons why he was successful.
He did a great job with the youths, of course, Brian Kidd as well.
Yeah.
He
worked really well with Eric Harrison initially to set up, which we'll talk about later.
I'd rather tell him I'd been on a bender than Sir Alex Ferguson, that's for sure.
Right. Well, that's Kiddo. Roy is here. All is good in the world again. And we are heading next to Mr. Molyneux, to Pete. And Pete, who's the next vital backroom man that we're tapping into?
Right. Well, I've gone for my first choice is Tommy Kavanagh. And when Tommy Dock arrived as United's manager in December 72, have you got the league table slide, Tim?
The which one, Pete?
The league table for when Doherty arrived, just to put a context on it.
I don't have that one, unfortunately.
All right, don't worry.
Yeah.
I could just talk through it. But basically, Tommy Dock arrived late December 72. United were in turmoil at that stage. We've had our difficult times with two chairmen needing to save us, and we had a terrible disaster in 58. But behind those three, I think 72 was when I've most known United in turmoil. We might think that 2022 we were in turmoil, but believe me, in 72, we'd sacked the second manager after Busby. George Best had resigned that week. We'd lost 5-0 at Palace, the bottom club, and we sat 1 point away from relegation. And it needed somebody who could sort things out. And Tommy Dock was the man. But he went right away. His first port of call was to get his old mate, Tommy Kavanagh. And he'd appointed him as first team trainer was his official title. He could have had any title, really. He was, in essence, Doherty's right-hand man. And the two Tommies had played together at Preston, or met up at Preston in 1949 when Doherty had come down from Celtic. In Doherty's early programme notes at Old Trafford, when he got the job in 72, he assured supporters it wasn't just an old pals act. And he described Tommy Kavanagh as a terrific motivator of players with the terrible fault of being dedicated to football. So that's what the Doc thought of him at the outset. And so began an era at Old Trafford that would never have a dull moment from 72 to 77. And it was a 5-year carousel ride, I guess, that inspired a fanatical following. It witnessed heartbreaking relegation, but then a rise to the top. And that laid the foundations. I said Kiddo laid the foundation for the modern day Manchester United. But it got us back from that tailspin we'd been in since winning the European Cup in 68. And we should not underestimate Tommy Kavanagh's role in that. When a club's in turmoil, and we've had a taste of that with Ollie and Ralph this season, the manager that comes in needs an absolute rock by his side. Somebody you can trust and rely upon, somebody you want by your side in wartime trenches. And Tommy Dock's rock was Tommy Kavanagh. United would need a management team that would be strong and determined in weathering the change that was ahead in 72. They had to get rid of some of the players who were basically had got a bit too cozy in their playing days and perhaps had achieved the peak by winning the European Cup at Wembley 4 years before. So they needed to get out some of the players who they thought now were not fit for purpose, and at the same time get young players in and encourage them. And the United squad, it seems, embraced Kavanagh's training methods. They warmed to his motivational skills and his humour. He was a hard taskmaster, but he had real humour. And Brian Greenough said when he recalled Tommy Kavanagh coming in, that he said, we used to come off the training ground with smiles on our faces. We had a laugh, but we'd really, really worked our socks off. And Greenough said that when you're training that hard every day, you need that humour. And Tommy Kavanagh had a knack of breaking that monotony of day in, day out training. Doherty's view on Tommy Kavanagh was that we made quite a great team, both extroverts, both shouting and bawling at each other and everyone, but the players had a lot of respect for Tommy Kavanagh as he knew what he was doing. Tommy Kavanagh was hard-working, he was enthusiastic, totally committed to the cause, and as a duo, him and Doherty were formidable. And the cause was to stop the rot that United found themselves in. He saved them from, Doherty and Kavanagh saved them from relegation in 73. And Tommy Kavanagh played a huge part in that, getting United some key wins, getting the players playing the way we needed to play. And we escaped relegation in 72, 73. As well as the players taking to Tommy Kavanagh pretty quick, The Stretford end and the crowd took to Tommy Kavanagh very quick. He used to always come off. If it was Old Trafford, he'd had to run on the pitch to see to a player. He'd always come off behind the goals at the Stretford end. And he was exalted. He was adored. You would hear the chant go up of, "Oh, Tommy, 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 Tommy Kavanagh." I've never known a backroom member of staff get that sort of adulation in the 60 years I've been watching United. The fans loved him. And he loved the fans. He always gave a wave and a smile. And at away grounds, that counted even more when perhaps sometimes we were really up against it. Tommy Kavanagh had no fear. He'd go on the field, treat the player who was injured for us, come off. He'd be getting booed and harangued by the home fans at our away matches. But he'd just get the Stretford end going by that wave and that smile. But he could do the job on the pitch, and United escaped relegation in 73, went down in 74, but came back out of that one season in the second division and just blew teams away, playing great attacking football, going forward with power and pace, which is the United way. And when we had 3 games left in 75, 76, United was still on top. In the end, they won neither the league or the cup. But they finished second in both. And considering we'd been relegated 2 years before, it was an amazing transformation. A year later, United won the cup with Tommy Dock and Kavanagh playing their part, and they delivered. And the transformation they had made in that 5 years was second to none. And they were both adored by United fans near and far. Tommy Dock sadly went in 77 because of off-the-field issues. But a measure of Tommy Kavanagh's standing in football was when a very good coach called Dave Sexton came to manage United. He kept Tommy Kavanagh in that post for the 4 years he was there. So Tommy Cav played an important 8 years at Old Trafford, delivering the goods. And we remember him fondly, those that saw the teams he helped train and produce. The performances on the pitch, there was never a dull moment. So there's a warm place in our hearts for Tommy Kavanagh.
Brilliant stuff, Pete. Brilliant stuff. Right, Roy.
Just a point on that, Tim.
Yeah.
Of course, Tommy Kavanagh, no relation, by the way, sadly, but no relation. But Tommy Kavanagh also was Johnny Carey's right-hand man when Notts Forest ran United very close to the 1967 league title. So, he had abilities. The first time I ever saw him was playing actually for Huddersfield Town in 1955 at United. He was a decent inside forward, hard worker. And Pete's mentions there of him were perfectly correct. 1972 was a very dark, dismal time. By 1977, Manchester United were rocking, and Tommy Kavanagh deserves a lot of praise for making that happen.
Brilliant stuff. Roy, we're going to stay with you, and we're going to head to your first selection. So take it away.
Yeah, this is Walter Krickmer, who was a really vital. I mean, we're talking about backroom people here, and everyone that Roger, Tim, and Pete, and hopefully myself have picked are very, very worthy of this. Walter Krickmer puts a different slant on perhaps some of the others in that when he joined Manchester United in 1919, after the end of the Second World War, Manchester United then were only 17 years old as a club because obviously they'd formed after the Newton Heath scenario. And he joined United's office staff, which would be very, very limited to say the least. And he was only 19 then. John Henry Davis was the chairman. And it was 1926 when Walter became club secretary. By then, United were in a very, very turbulent time because the great successes of 1908 to 1911, when they won the league twice and they won the FA Cup, they were fading dramatically. and the death of John Henry Davis in 1927, who along, in my opinion, with Gibson, were without a shadow of a doubt, and Harold Hardman were without a shadow of a doubt the three greatest chairmen that Manchester United ever had. But when Davis died sadly in 1927, that plunged the club into even more turmoil because we'd been relegated in 1922, promoted back in 1925, relegated again in 1931. And by the last game of 1934, they were threatened with relegation to Division 3. And, you know, you just think when you look around today in what an old, excuse my language, an old fart like myself would look at, because Premier League to me is the first division, Championship second, and then you've got your third and fourth. But just imagine Manchester United being threatened to be relegated into the third division. You look at teams that are in there nowadays, how long would it have taken them to get out? And on the last day, they had to win at Millwall. Never an easy task. And they won 2-0. And they say, as they say, after that, the rest is history. And it's a good job there was no social media around in that period, 1919 to 1939, most definitely. The period from 1927 until Gibson became the chairman in 1931 had these serious financial issues that had to be addressed. And Walter Crickmer was the man who actually went and spoke to Gibson about coming to United as the club chairman. And the first thing Gibson did was invest £2,000, which was a heck of a lot of money in those days. And he bought everybody a turkey for Christmas. So, you know, Crickmer was really at the hot end of situations with Manchester United. In that time, he also became the temporary manager in 1932 and for a season, and he repeated that in 1938. So technically, and he was there when, you know, they signed Matt Busby in 1945. So Matt signed it, and through the Second World War, he was technically the manager as well. That's a great picture there. Well done, Tim, of Crickmer signing up Samat. But those are just mere facts, gents. Walter Crickmer from 1946 reverted to his primary role, that of secretary of Manchester United. And he was the helm of that when we won the Cup in 1948. We won 3 league titles in 1952, 1956 and 1957. The times of huge crowds, but not that many all-ticket games. And when they were, they had to be administered. And those two other pictures that have just come up, the one on the left is a picture in January 1957, January 1958, a mere 3 weeks before the air crash, when Samat had his first This Is Your Life. He had a second one, I think, in 1970. And the picture on the right, of course, is the cover of the actual match programme in Belgrade on the 5th of February 1958. And Walter Crickmer is sat on the front row on the left-hand side with Harold Hardman next but one to him with the cup there. The introduction, of course, of the European Cup in 1956 and the logistics involved. You know, you had to arrange dates by telegram because they didn't go to the draw and things such as that. And I know there were some really difficult things to get over, like when they had to go to Prague and then, of course, to Belgrade, teams behind the Iron Curtain. And then, of course, Walter sadly was one of the 23 who perished at Belgrade, alongside his team, his colleagues. Without a shadow of a doubt, we're talking here of a true Manchester United man. indispensable is a long word, but in his case was perfectly fitting, because when you look from that period, 1919 to 1958, two or three relegations, nearly into the third division, even stepping in as manager a couple of times throughout the war, when of course and the first 3 years after the war we had to play at Main Road, then going with a successful side, cup finals, league titles, then going into the unknown in Europe, all the logistics, and he was at the helm of it. That was Walter Crickmore.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff, Roy. Yeah, tremendous servant to the club. Indeed was Walter. Right. So I guess that brings up my first choice, and I've gone for another one of Fergie's assistants in Carlos Queiroz. Now, Carlos came to the club in 2002 to replace Steve McLaren, and he really set about upon arriving and modernizing United's tactics and how they played in Europe. He helped bring the title back to Old Trafford in 2002 and 2003, and it was their first. They up until he arrived, since the turn of the century in 2000, they'd only won one major trophy in the Premier League. So to bring the trophy back in 2002 and 2003, and we did an episode on we won our trophy back, and certainly Carlos Queiroz played a massive part in that. The following summer, Beckham went, as we saw, and Ronaldo came in, and he played a big part in bringing in Cristiano Ronaldo to United. However, that same summer, Real Madrid came knocking on the door, and Carlos left to go to Real Madrid, only to return a summer later. And it was an indication of how important Queiroz was to Fergie, because that when he left, United finished 15 points behind Arsenal in the 03-04 season. Walter Smith had to come in towards the end of the season there for the run-in to assist Fergie. And so getting Carlos Queiroz back for the following season was a vital coup for United, and certainly for Fergie. The transition in the team began to take place, and it was Queiroz that kind of really oversaw that transition and worked with Fergie to rebuild or recondition the team. Roy Keane left in 2005. Ruud Van Nistelrooy left in 2006. And it was a team. Rooney had come by that point, and it was a team that was taking shape with Rooney and Ronaldo. They were trying to create more of a fluid front line with sort of inverted wingers. Traditionally they played with the wingers that would sort of try to get to the byline and put a cross in or deliver crosses. And this was a change that Queiroz oversaw in terms of having them hopefully achieve more success in Europe and develop more of a continental style of football, if you will, with a fluid front line and inverted wingers that would cut into the middle. And we saw that with how they developed Ronaldo cutting into the middle and trying to become more of a goal scorer as opposed to a facilitator, if you will. He was a tremendous tactician. He was very diligent on the training pitch. In fact, it was Carlos Queiroz, the semifinal against Barcelona in 2008, who took the lead in training. And leading up to the game, I was reading an article, and leading up to the game, he actually put up mats all over the pitch, and he wanted and walked through with one of the United players holding a ball where he wanted the defender to be in certain situations. And I read an article, and Gary Neville said we've never seen that level of detail and tactical. Now it's that Carlos had brought to United and to the training. United won the league in 06-07, and this kicked off a run of 3 titles on the bounce. Carlos wouldn't be there to see United win them all, but he certainly set them up for large success through that period. He'd leave again in 2008, but they would go on to win 3 consecutive titles from the 06-07 season. And his vision came to fruition in that 06-07 season because Ronaldo scored 23 goals from a right wing position, which was just a tremendous haul for, not a number 9. We look at a traditional number 9 and say it'd be terrific if you had a player that scored 20 goals in a season as a center forward. Well, Ronaldo was doing it from the right wing, and it just goes to show the sort of tactics that Queiroz brought to United. So as I said, they would go on to win 3 titles in a row, and in fact, in the 09-10 season, gents, they only finished a point behind Chelsea, and it would have made it 4 in a row. So that would have been just a tremendous run of success for United over that stretch. And then if you point to what happened in Europe as well, they won. Obviously, United won the Champions League in 07-08. They got to the final again the next year, and then in the 2011 went to the final again in 2011. So three finals in 4 years, and you could clearly that's evidence as well that Queiroz's impact on the tactics on the team. Although he had gone by that time, by that last final, again left in 2008. Those were his teams that him and Fergie built, and that Carlos was instrumental on the training pitch, tactically getting set up. Under Queiroz, United won 5 under 5 seasons of Carlos Queiroz. Sorry, they won 3 league titles, 2 Community Shields, and a Champions League. After he left, but with his sides, they would go on to win another further 2 Premier Leagues, 2 League Cups, 2 Champions League, get to the final of the Champions League twice, and 2 Community Shields. And as I said, testament to what he did as a number 2 under Fergie. Before he came, they'd only won 1 league title, one major honor from 2000 and the 2000 season to the 2002-2003 season when he arrived. So tremendous player, assistant manager. His impact, of course, being the transition in the playing style, and certainly bore fruit, which paved the way to the success that United had garnered over that period that is mentioned. Right, Pete, you're just on mute there. I think you were trying to say something.
I was going to say how very thorough that was, Tim. I learned quite a bit myself there about Carlos Queiroz. I didn't know. I didn't realise of his influence behind that very key Barcelona semi-final in 2008. But yeah, he took United to the top of the world.
Yeah.
With Fergie.
Am I right? Is he the current Iran coach?
Yeah, Egypt. I think Egypt or Iran. One of the two. Right, you're right, Roy.
Yeah. But again, Fergie here, sometimes by luck, sometimes by chance. The evolution of number 2s from Archie Knox all the way through Kidd, McLaren, who was also mightily successful, Carlos, Phelan, whoever may have missed the odd one out. But it keeps you motivated as well as a player, mustn't it? As opposed to get nicey, and I agree. I mean, a lot of the times, of course, as in life, you don't realise what you've got. And, like Pete's just mentioned, that role of success that Carlos had, you just take for granted, don't you? And then you look back 20 years after and go, wow.
When I looked back in one of the articles, and it had that layout of the honors that they had won under Queiroz, and then how it paved the path for that run of success was just tremendous. So just a tremendous another vital backroom man for sure. And Roy, we're coming back to you for your second pick. Take it away.
Yeah, well, this is Les Olive. And it's a different slant again to the assistant managers and that we've had. But Les Olive, a bit like Crickmar, joined United after a world war. In Les's case, it was 1947. A good Salford lad. And Walter's involvement with Manchester United, Les's involvement with Manchester United, again, can go seriously under the radar. He worked as Walter Crickmar's assistant through those years of success that United had after the Second War with the 48 and then Cup and then 3 league titles. And of course, he was the man left behind at Old Trafford on the evening of the 6th of February 1958, when the indispensable, as I put it, secretary, Walter Crickmore, was no longer. And the day after, at the urgently convened board meeting over in Bowden at the house of Alan Gibson, Edwards was made chairman, and Les Olive was made the secretary. Les himself, after the war and when he first joined United, did have ambitions of a playing role, and he was a real John O'Shea. He played all over the place, really did. But he settled by the late 40s as a goalkeeper, and incredibly, in 1952. 1953, United hit a real injury crisis around the Easter time. Jack Crompton was ill, Ray Wood was injured, and Les Olive actually was promoted and played 2 games over the Easter holidays of 1953 as United's goalkeeper. The first one, his debut, was at Newcastle, which was also Dennis Violet's debut that day. But then he reverted back to being the assistant club secretary. In those immediate days after the Munich air crash, 1958-9 season, up to and including the 61-2 league season, Les, settled into the role, and then at the beginning of the 62-3 season, he was certainly very visible as we signed the truly great Dennis Law. And I think I mentioned it before, in my lifetime or my time following United. There's Les actually signing the official forms with Dennis looking very, very cool, very Italian, between Gigi Perinoshi there on the left-hand side, Samat and Jimmy. But Les was really involved in all these major transfer dealings, and of course, I think, sorry, I went off track there. I apologize. I think I did say that the signing of Dennis Law and the signing of Eric Cantona are the 2 greatest signings of the many great signings United have made. And Les was quickly the following season into action, admin-wise, because we had the bad winter of 1963 when football got virtually called off from Boxing Day 62 to March the 5th in United's case when the 3rd round of the FA Cup was played. And then they had to play between March the 5th and the end of last Saturday in the March. They played the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, and the 6th round of the FA Cup in that 1 month. Then the semi-final, then the FA Cup, and then, of course, league titles in 65 and 67, the European Cup in 68. Again, all the admin that's involved in that. The logistics this time were much easier than they were under Crittner, but even so, there was more all-ticket games, far more all-ticket games. When he retired, he became a director of Manchester United in 1958, and had the pleasures of Sir Alex's times lay before him until his sad death in 2006. Like Walter Crickmore, totally dedicated to the club. And there's the other iconic signing I mentioned to Tim, and Tim has produced the brilliant one of Dennis Law, and that infamous one of the of the table suddenly stuck on the pitch before we beat Wolves 5-0. So Roy scoring a magnificent hat trick, and there's Brian Robson, another truly great United signing, of course, and Les Olive pointing out where that signature needed to be made. But without a shadow of a doubt, a loyal clubman who delivered. And his involvement, his love of the youths as well, like Crittmer. Crittmer was very involved with the Moo Jacks, and Les, there he is, with one of the looks like one of the FA Youth Cup sides, and this link of Manchester United, from somebody at 15 until someone at say 35 as a player. But the admin and those roles are vital. And without a shadow of a doubt, Les Olive fulfilled his role for Manchester United.
Indeed. Thanks for that, Roy. We're headed back over to Roger and Roger's second selection. But I think your mic's on mute there, Roger. Just have to unmute your mic.
I've done that for a lifetime. Right. my second selection is that of Mike Phelan. He was at United for 13 years. I've had 13 years in a couple of jobs, actually, and I don't think I've achieved probably a quarter of what he achieved, probably not even that. I like him. He was promoted by Fergie, and if Fergie promotes you, then you can't be bad at what you're doing. Originally from Burnley as a player, he was in that Norwich City side that also featured Steve Bruce, and they would both become great leaders for United. He came to United in 1989 to shore up our midfield, and he became really the voice of Fergie, I think, on the pitch. In '89, Fergie had sort of cut the squad a bit bare, and we were drifting, and it was really good, I think, to have a voice of authority on the pitch, particularly as Brian Robson was often injured. We got involved in scraps with Arsenal that had us points deducted and things got a bit feisty, and certainly Mike Phelan was there amongst all of that. Anyway, he left United, with quite a bit of silverware, went to West Brom as a player, and then started coaching with Gary Megson when he was at Stockport County. When Megson got the boot from Stockport, basically Sir Alex Ferguson put out the hand of friendship as a former United player for him, and like Brian Kidd, invited him to come in to the academy, where he stayed basically for less than 12 months before he took up a first team coaching role. And I can sort of glib most of the stats, I think, that Tim has presented from the period, really. But he was quite a thoughtful coach, and he was a coach of the era where they were moving away from pen and paper to sort of whiteboards and screens, much more in modern thinking. And his mantra, according to his own materials, which you can read, is about gaining respect, talking to players, getting their opinion, and being able to relate to players in a language that they can actually understand. So we don't all learn the same way, and I think Phelan was quick to realise you had to talk to each individual player in a different manner. So he was also in charge of running the reserves at United. And we had a decent reserve team. We've run through some of the famous players that were sort of crowning us in glory. There you can see his stats, looking at 3 roles at United. We're talking about the first 2, really. I don't think it would be right, really, to judge his performance in his last spell, because there was so much that probably needed changing around him at Old Trafford during his time with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. As I say, he was Fergie on the pitch. He came to Old Trafford already with some really good experience as an assistant manager. And I put on there as well, he often spoke on behalf of Sir Alex. When Sir Alex fell out with the BBC circa 2000, Mike Phelan was the man who often had to face the cameras. Certainly, if you watch Match of the Day on a Saturday evening, you would be hearing the words of Mike Phelan as opposed to those of Fergie. And really, it was almost like hearing Fergie. There you can see with another Premier League crown. But at this time, United squad, it was very different from the time of Brian Kidd. When Brian Kidd was coaching United players, those players largely had been at United a long time, had been brought up through the ranks. There was masses of respect for authority and things like that. But the United squad that Phelan would be coaching had over 40 players in it, and he had to handle, the likes of Van Nistelrooy, Ronaldo, Scholes, and of course Wayne Rooney. And I'm always reminded of Glenn Hoddle when he was an England coach. He had Paul Ince with him, and they were taking free kicks on the field, and Ince took a free kick, and Hoddle said to him, that's not good enough. And he said, what do you mean, boss? And Hoddle would take this free kick and he'd float it past David Seaman into the top corner, and he'd say, that's how you curl a free kick. But he could never actually teach Paul Ince to curl the ball like he could. So Mike Phelan's job actually was improving people like Ronaldo, improving people like Van Nistelrooy, which is no mean feat, really. And I think, as we said already, this was an unprecedented era of success for United. And no assistant as part of a team is ever going to be able to reel off so much silverware. Premier League titles, 2001, 3, 7, 8, 9, 11 and 13. We had a rebuild, obviously, in the middle of that period that involved bringing people like Jason Parkin, Carrick, Hargreaves, Fletcher, Tevez. They all had to be drilled, and they all had to fit into what Sir Alex's plan was. And it's worth remembering, I think, as well, Jose Mourinho had joined the party halfway through all this, and actually assembled a really, really good Chelsea team in his first couple of years that looked as if they were going to dominate football forever, especially given Roman Abramovich's money. And of course, there was the Arsenal Invincibles team that I remember Paul Scholes defeating at Villa Park in the FA Cup, by the way, so they weren't totally invincible. But I think in terms of a backroom member of staff, he's going to be the only one, I think, that's gone to 3 Champions League finals in 4 years. So that's 2008, that's 2009, and 2011. Well, I've got some points for discussion here for the lads. And my question is, when Fergie left, should we have kept on Mike Phelan? Was this David Moyes' first mistake? After all, David Moyes tried to coach Les Ferdinand and Rio Ferdinand, rather. Mm-hmm. And I think he should have stayed. That's my view. What do you think, guys?
Yes, and yes.
Yeah.
Those were two mistakes. I mean, we've all had situations in work where you've got to make decisions, etc. And new people come around you, or you go around new people. And without a shadow of a doubt, that was Moyes' biggest mistake. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can understand him wanting to have someone alongside him who he could totally trust, perhaps 2 people. But Phelan, as you just said there, in 4 years, he was assistant manager when United had reached the Champions League final. So there's a lot, and of course the players knew him. So unless they had personal animosity, which we wouldn't know about, I think that was a major mistake.
I think as well.
Yeah, I agree, Roy. 100%.
When Ferguson came to the club, he did a complete rebuild himself. He looked at every single brick in the place. But obviously, the longer he was there, the more he knew what the components were and how trusted they were. And actually, a lot of people will say, Phelan was running the show by the time, Fergie was thinking about retiring, and Fergie was just prioritising what needed to be done. So I think it was a really poor oversight on David Moyes' part. My other closing comment would be, actually, amongst all the people we've talked about, Sir Alex Ferguson didn't make one bad appointment. And that really is amazing, to be able to continue that success in such a seamless way. I'm always reminded of Brian Clough, actually. He was similarly brilliant. But as soon as Peter Taylor left him, Brian Clough just couldn't find anybody that he gelled with the same way. And Nottingham Forest were never as successful again. So I think Ferguson really deserves some credit for being able to keep the ship going in a seamless direction.
That's such a good point. It was a very, very good point, Roger. Indeed. Right. Well, that was very, very good. Thanks, Roger, for that. And on to Pete, and for his second selection, another assistant manager.
Yeah, and I've gone for, so I should say thanks to Roger there for a very comprehensive roundup of Mickey Phelan, a very low-profile guy. Apart from when he's popping balloons, but but so he deserves all that credit. So I've gone for Steve McLaren, not a long-serving member of staff or backroom guy. He was only there for just over 2 years, 2 and a bit years. But he did preside over, as a backroom coach, assistant manager, our greatest ever triumph, which I'll come to. But as Fergie was building through it from 1986, he got Archie Knox in, got a good formula going there, as Roger alluded to. Every manager needs a good right-hand person. He'd done that, lost him, got Kiddo in, and that worked, and that had stayed there for 8 years. So when Kiddo left to be a number one at Blackburn in December 98, Fergie took a few weeks actually to consider who the best fit would be. I think that's one of the reasons, as Roger said, he didn't make any bad appointments. He took his time. He didn't dive in. But Kidd and Knox had been stalwarts helping Fergie take United to the back to the top of English football. But in early 1999, United weren't just trying to get back to the top of English football. They were going for greater heights. I'd said before that Tommy Kavanagh came in when United were nearly on the verge of relegation. When Steve McLaren came in 27 years later in 1999, United were halfway up football's Everest. Fergie said at the time that the job hadn't gone to interim coach Jimmy Ryan because he knew that the job called for a younger man, because there's a lot more physical work involved in being an assistant manager, a first-team coach in 1999 than perhaps there had been in the past. Well, McLaren was 37 and he got the job by a nose from a certain David Moyes, I believe. So there's a sliding doors moment. McLaren had a reputation as one of the country's top coaches. It embraced a host of new ideas. It partnered up with Jim Smith at Derby and got them back into the Premier League a couple of years before 99. And he'd employed a full-time fitness trainer. He employed a sports psychologist. He used a Prozone system for tracking players' every move throughout the game. Stuff that we think of as second nature now. It's just like oxygen in the air, but it wasn't there in 99. He also created preparation chambers for players to sit in before training, and introduced motivational videos and footages to aspire players. Again, a bit like Tommy Cav, Manchester United players quickly took to Steve McLaren. They liked his unerring eye for detail and how he prepared for games. Anyway, McLaren joined United on the 6th of February, a very important date in our history, but that was in 1999, and it was an away game at Notts Forest. United won that game 8-1. I think it was the biggest away win at that time. Maybe still is, I should check my facts, in our 121-year history at the time. But apparently he was on the bench watching all this going on. He'd only arrived at the club that week. And he said to some of the substitutes, "Is it like this every match?" As it got to 5-1, 6-1, 7-1. Of course it wasn't, but it wasn't too far away from that in 1999. 99. I think McLaren's main strengths were just his simple ability to work with players, gain their respect quickly, a modern thinker in terms of training and tactics. And he'd looked abroad at other clubs, how they train, and he'd looked into other sports, such as American baseball, to see how you could keep players motivated. Steve McLaren himself said there's a lot of myths around coaching, but basically it's a simple job. You've got to supply the motivation to train and practice day in, day out. We forget that really when we just watch on the match day from our seat or from our sofa. That it's just about putting that hard work in on the training pitch. Anyway, Steve McLaren's appointment was a masterstroke, according to the Old Trafford insiders. He says himself that he came into a club that was 4 points ahead at the top of the league. And so he applied the old adage, if it ain't broken, don't try and fix it. And he said he went in, just had a look at the routine, saw how things were done, and kept the players on their toes. He got to know those players, their habits, and the little extra things that they like doing and dislike doing. And within a few weeks, he'd settled into the role almost seamlessly from Brian Kidd's 8-year tenure. Now, McLaren was either a very lucky charm or he could walk the talk. But Manchester United, months after his appointment, went on to win the Champions League, the Premier League, and the FA Cup, becoming, as we all know, the first and so far only English team, to win the treble. After McLaren's appointment, United didn't lose another game that season. In fact, they didn't lose another game for 37 matches after McLaren stepped in. His coaching and his teamwork with Sir Alex helped United retain the Premier League in 2000. And for the first time in our history, in 2001, we won back-to-back 3-in-a-row league titles, only the 4th club in history ever to do that. Now, what's telling, I think, is Roger said, if Fergie appoints you, you mustn't be doing something good in your job. If Roy Keane gives you a good resume, then you definitely must be doing something good in your job. And Roy Keane wrote in his own biography that McLaren brought a different but very much his own qualities to the job. He had his technical ability and his organisation, his passing on of information to the training pitch were absolutely outstanding. He had a really open mind. If McLaren heard about something new, he'd give it a try, and if it worked, they'd keep it. If it didn't, they'd ditch it. And when, sadly, his tenure came to an end, only 2.5 seasons in, by default, really, 2 things happened. One, Fergie had said that he was going to retire in 2001 at the end of 2002, season 01-02. I think McLaren read the writing on the wall that he probably wouldn't get the job. And I think other chairmen came sniffing around for McLaren, and the Middlesbrough chairman, Steve Gibson, won that race and talked McLaren into leaving Old Trafford and going to Middlesbrough, where he had some success, and then obviously onto the England job. I think if Fergie, of course, Fergie stayed. I think if Fergie could have changed his mind earlier, McLaren would have stayed, and we may have built very much on that record. He won all 3 titles in his time there, McLaren, 3 league titles, and he won that FA Cup and that Champions League to win as the treble. So it would have been easy. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if McLaren had stayed on. I do think there's always a very thin but very discernible line between a good number 1, a manager, and a good number 2, an assistant manager or coach. Not every good coach makes a good manager, and vice versa. And I think with McLaren, he's definitely a good coach. I'm not sure he could manage so well left to his own abilities. But the thing is, like a good old boomerang, given that United are in Oz at the moment, McLaren's returned to help Erik Ten Hag return United to the top of English football. So let's hope he can do it.
Yes, indeed.
Steve McLaren, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
Well done,
good point.
Pete. Yep, thank you very, very much for that. And I will take it away with finishing up with the last one of the 8, but certainly someone that has had a a major, massive impact on United, and that is Eric Harrison. So, youth team manager from 1981 to 1998. Ron Atkinson made two important signings, and we saw Brian Robson sat at the table there signing his contract. The other important signing that Ron Atkinson made was Eric Harrison. Came in 1981, saw through the likes of Norman Whiteside, Clayton Blackmore, Mark Hughes, Graham Hogg. And when Fergie came in 86, Harrison was kept on. He was one of the staff members that was kept on by Fergie. And there's a famous exchange between the two of them where Fergie came to see Eric Harrison and said, he wanted players to come into the first team from the academy. And Eric Harrison named off the likes of certainly the club legends that I just talked about, the players that came through. And Sir Alex Ferguson said, "I want more." And Eric's reply was, "Get me more good young players into the system and I'll get them into the first team." And that he did. So he led United to youth cup victories. The youth set up to youth cup victories in 92 and 1995. And of course, in the course of those triumphs, developed the famous class of 92. And we all know what the class of 92 went on to achieve. Both Neville brothers, David Beckham, Paul Scholes, Giggsy, Nicky Butt, as well as Robbie Savage and Keith Gillespie, who left United to make their own careers elsewhere. Eric Harrison, you read what these lads say about him. He was the mentor. It wasn't just about the football. It was about preparing these kids for life, or for life outside of football, or football at a different club. It was very much like a father figure to a lot of the lads. He was hard. Clayton Blackmore tells some pretty famous exchanges that he had with Eric Harrison. So he was hard on them, but at the same time, they all respected him, and he loved them all. And when Robbie Savage was released from United without playing a first team game for them, Eric a letter that he still has was sent to him from Eric Harrison, encouraging him to not give up on football and to go on and cut his own path. As I said, the Neville school, they all speak as him as a second father. He taught them the way they should speak to the kitmen or canteen ladies, the way they dress, their timekeeping. He really made a massive impact on these lads' lives. And when we talk about, nowadays even with the United Academy, where they talk about it's a family atmosphere, and we want to develop the kids, for not just their footballing skills, but their character and how they conduct themselves. That was very much a part of Eric Harrison's mantra, and it was certainly something that he left at the club. Certainly, that was certainly started with Jimmy Murphy and Sir Matt with the academy, but was certainly emphasized by Eric Harrison. And Ron Atkinson's verdict on Eric Harrison was that he might never have featured in a back page headline in his life, but Eric was a coach whose contribution to United should not be underestimated. And I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, that's our sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say that's our top 8.
Yeah.
And I think we must apologise at this stage, just before we finish on a 9th, for some of the great names we've had to miss out that didn't make the cut. We mentioned some of them in passing, but Archie Knox, a great number 2. Louis Rocker, one of the most famous men in the formation of Manchester United. Sorry, not the formation, but the formation. Keeping United going across the war years. He was the man that identified Matt Busby as a potential manager for United after the war. So we may do a separate programme on Louis Rocker. Mick Brown, Jack Crompton, Joe Armstrong, Tom Curry, Bert Wally. God bless them all. They served a massive part in United's history. But we each chose our two. But there's one man in United's history who is probably the greatest backroom man, a person that pushed United to the fore in our darkest hour. And probably, Roy, your best position to set it up for us. Do you want to give us your view?
Well, yeah, it's very difficult to get the definitive title of the man who saved Manchester United after Munich. Was Jimmy Murphy the most vital thing in Matt Busby's life? They really were different as chalk and cheese in a lot of ways as personalities. So Matt would like to go to places to relax, like the Cromford Club, mix with the stars, where Jimmy would go down to the pub with a fag and a pint. And so, two different personalities who'd known each other before the war, because Jimmy was a very good player with West Bromwich Albion, Wales. So they'd locked horns when Matt was with City and Liverpool. And then, of course, Matt heard an inspirational speech Jimmy was doing to the forces and made him his first signing. And then by 1958, the man who stepped fantastically, magnificently, whatever you want to use, to rescue the club, working 25 hours in a 24-hour day. But two or three interesting stories that I've told about Jimmy. The first one was the first season after the war in 1946-7. United Reserves, which Jimmy looked after, won the Central League title. And Matt said, right, who have we got in his side that we're going to put into the first team? And he said, none. Because those players, like the first team, had lost 6-7 years of their life. So you're in the reserve team at 27, winning the Central League title, but you weren't really the sort of player you needed to go into that first team. And that's where they both instantly went onto this youth campaign. And of course, the one big break we had, as I say, that word luck in everyone's life at the right time is vital. It's one of the most unused four-letter words. But in 1952, the FA Youth Cup started at a perfect time for United and the crusade that Matt and Jimmy were entertaining about the youth play. And Jimmy took that on board 100%. So your Bobby Charltons, your Duncan Edwards, your Eddie Coleman, all of these, Albert Scanlon, Wilf McGuinness, all of them, they talk of Jimmy Murphy. They don't talk of Sir Matt. They talk of Jimmy Murphy because it was Jimmy who was instrumental. And I know timing, I didn't help matters by coming along far too late, which I do apologise again. But I've got a lovely little story if I've got time, Tim and Pete. I became very friendly with Harold Bratt, who sadly passed away a few years ago. Harold only played once in the first team for United, but he was a Busby babe, and he was there on that eerie morning of February the 7th when the team, or the players that were left at Old Trafford, were in the dressing room, about 10 of them, and Harold was in that crowd. Harold remembered his first year as a youth player, and they were going over to play Huddersfield in the FA Youth Cup. Now, under Jimmy Murphy, the youth team were undefeated for 5 seasons. They won the first 5 years, but they only lost one game, and that was a semi-final right towards the end of that, when they'd already won the first leg 5-2 away. And they were on the way to play Huddersfield, and suddenly Murphy comes along at the back, and Harold's on the bus, and he thought, oh no, what have I done? He said, right. He said, I've got you marking this inside forward, who's 6 stone wet through, who's got national health spectacles on, with a plaster on one of the lens. Do not let him out of your sight. And Harold's thinking, and after about 10 minutes, when this inside right had scored one and laid on the second one, Harold was glad he was on this side of the pitch and Jimmy was on the far side. Luckily, United got a goal just on half time, and he went in at half time and thought, oh no. And he didn't pick on him. He just turned around and said, look, I told you, but the rest of you now, make sure this guy, whoever's the closest to him in the 46th minute, puts him out of the game. And Mark Pearson stood on his foot. He didn't break his metatarsal, but he made him very unhealthy for the second half. That guy, of course, was Dennis Law, who we tried to sign after the match. And Murphy had this knack and this man managership, total man managership. And what he did for Manchester United, there's been great books about him, some dodgy ones, but there've been some fantastic books about Jimmy Murphy. And I urge anyone out there to get hold of one or two, because he was the man who saved Manchester United. He was Mr. Manchester United. And in my opinion, he meant more to Matt Busby than Matt Busby necessarily needed to him. He was a man among men.
Thanks for that, Roy.
Yeah.
Pete, Roger?
I would just add a little bit in there, because I guess a lot of people know this, but Jimmy Murphy wasn't on the flight to Munich because he was managing Wales. Wales had played Israel in a World Cup qualifying match. That same match, as manager of Wales, he decided to stay back. There's just a little funny story there, just to involve Murphy directly, but it wasn't a group match. Wales were playing Israel, and Israel had only been formed as a state 10 years before. And controversially, as it sounds now, a lot of countries refused to play them. So they got buys through to the World Cup finals in '58, or they would have done, because teams refused to play them. FIFA said, we can't have that. Only the winners and the hosts can get to the finals without playing. And so they picked a team who would come the closest to qualifying in the group stages to do just a kind of knockout against Israel. And that happened to be Wales. Okay, so it's a unique story in football terms, but they played home and away. I think Wales won both legs 2-0. But that's what kept Jimmy Murphy off the plane to Belgrade in 1958. But as a man, we can only imagine how Jimmy Murphy felt on the morning of February the 7th when he came round. He woke up and realised what had happened to his beloved players and club and team and friends. And yet he had to carry on not just with United that season and resurrect them, but he had to go to the World Cup finals in Sweden in 1958 then as manager of Wales. He had no break. You know, he was probably suffering from what would be recognised now as post-traumatic stress disorder, but he just kept going. And he kept going then through the next season and the season after, and for 10 years. Just what a trooper, what a man, what a person.
Yes, indeed.
Just one. I'm sorry about delaying things, but just one further point there. I had the real pleasure of meeting Sir Matt one-to-one on a couple of occasions, and then in company. But I never met Jimmy Murphy. But I did correspond with him. I've still got the letter actually. And when I wrote the first biography on Duncan Edwards with Ian McCartney, I wrote to him asking about his views on Duncan Edwards, and I got a handwritten reply, and he just said, "Dear Roy, it's too upsetting to talk. He was the greatest, Jimmy." You know, Pete's mentioned. I apologise for not bringing her up. Well done, Pete.
Incredible.
But you know, thinking those players, they were his babe, they were his family, they were his kids from 15 years of age, and Billy Whelan, and it's just heartbreaking.
Incredible.
I was
Roger, over to you for the final word.
Yeah, I was just going to say, really, I mean, how do you run a club the size of Manchester United without being able to see and talk to Sir Matt Busby? He's dealing with everybody's grief, his own grief. You know, he's keeping the show going. I mean, you can only try and imagine what on earth it must have been like. And to reach the FA Cup final that season as well, you know, was a phenomenal achievement. And everybody in football must have cried the day we didn't win that, because especially what happened the season before. But it was just, I can remember reading first of all about the Busby Babes about the age of 6 when I read the Sun Soccer Annual. They had a double page spread in it, and I can remember, you know, seeing I think the picture of David Pegg actually and his teeth, and it just really resounded with me, and it made me so sad even as a 6-year-old reading about how a football team got on a plane that didn't didn't make it. And from that point onwards, I've never forgotten it. And, I can remember when obviously the anniversaries of the Munich disaster happened. We played Coventry at Old Trafford in 1988, which would have been 30 years. And, United were going nowhere. There were only just over 30,000, I think, in the ground that day. But I had to go because I had to pay my respects to those boys, really. And that's all they were. And I think, they're in the heart always of every true Manchester United fan. So that's what I wanted to say.
Indeed. Well put, Roger. And of course, Jimmy would carry on later towards the end of his tenure with United as a scout and is credited with identifying the likes of Gordon Hill and Stevie Coppell. So tremendous impacts indeed. It can't even put it into words. Tweet that came in leading up to this, just to round out a couple more individuals that he had mentioned that didn't get mentioned, but Ken Merritt and Ken Ramsden with 40 years service at United as well. So, but Jimmy Murphy, tremendous place to end the show, and of course the most vital man for sure at United. If you were going to make a hierarchy, indeed. But lads, this hour and 20 minutes has flown by. It's been another tremendous show. Thank you everybody that got involved on Twitter. Thanks for watching. If you want to catch up with our episodes, if you go to our Twitter handle at Warwick Road Walk, in our bio, there's a link where you can go to Warwick Road episodes and catch up on all the previous episodes of our podcast. We'll be back with you again next month. Thanks for tuning in.
Cheers. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.